Hello, Ranjit. All right, let's get started. So, first of all, welcome everyone to XHackers Meetup user group and our .NET community. We are celebrating here, as I mentioned, that this month is a month of Hacktoberfest, which is more of like open source contributions. So we are celebrating Hacktoberfest at this monthly meetup. So before we go into deep, basically Hacktoberfest is like presented by DigitalOcean and the dev community, and we'll look into that in detail in upcoming slides. So before I go into detail, let me just thank .NET Foundation for providing our meetup needs. And this session is also part of the .NET Foundation virtual user group, where you can join and you can find all the .NET related virtual user groups around the world. So do check it out, right? Meetup.com .NET virtual user group. It's initiative from the .NET Foundation, right? Um, a quick introduction about me. I'm your host, Durgesh Khandal. I work as a solution architect at Kimberly Clark, and in my free time, I love to play with code or build stuff. I'm also an open source contributor at Xamarin.Forms, and I had participated in Hacktoberfest 2019. So this session is more of about my experience, learnings, and lots of tips, basically. And you can find me more about like on social media, and I also write about sitecore and .NET on this blog post. Here is my colleague Swaminathan Vetri. Unfortunately, he couldn't join today's meetup, but I can introduce him. You can call him as Swami. He's also an organizer at XHackers which is a .NET based group. He's a software architect at Mars Technology Center, and he's also a Microsoft MVP. You can reach out to him on these handles and so in case if you have anything, if you would like to participate in community events, you can reach out to us, right? All right. For those who joined us for the first time, welcome to our Xamarin user group. We are a global community of developers who develop mobile applications using Xamarin and other Microsoft technologies. And these are our social groups. Let me just give you a quick introduction on the same. So you can join us our meetup user group, where you can find find basically other community members, and also about the upcoming events and the past events, right? So as part of last past event, we did a .NET Dev Summit last month, recording of I mean, you could find the links to the recordings here if you couldn't join, unfortunately. But we had had a .NET a blast like at .NET Dev Summit, because we called in some of the amazing speakers from the industry, including James Montemagno, Nishanel, right? So you could take a look at those recordings as well. Other than Meetup, we are also on the Facebook. So in case if you are like sharing your knowledge on Facebook, or you would like to keep update on the upcoming events, you can also join our group on Facebook. We are also there on Twitter. As you know, most of the .NET and Xamarin, especially Microsoft community, is active on Twitter, right? So you could find us on Twitter as well. Lots of knowledge to gain from there as well. And in case if you want like to see the past recordings, right? So we are also there on YouTube, where we have whatever like last up from our past meetups, the recordings and sessions we did. You can find all the collection here. So make use of this. I hope this would be helpful for you. So this is my favorite speaker slide, as always. So for today's session, we'll start with at 11:15, which is I guess in next 5 minutes. But I would like to take this opportunity to discuss and some of the updates on our community, and basically a community town hall like we discussed last time. So let me just give you an overview on that. So going forward, like we discussed, our roadmap is to, create a community and environment where we can, let's build together. Basically, if you are learning, if you are a beginner, let's try to build together things, right? Projects. For that, we propose that, now why not have a community town hall meetup in most of these meetup sessions, right? Where you could understand where we are progressing, what are the feedbacks from the community, right? And we also basically, uh, empower our open source basically empower and encourage our community to have more open source contributions, right? And this would help you to, even bring innovation as well. For example, if you would like to contribute to Microsoft projects as well as projects which are related to, climate or even sustainable development, and if you are new to this term sustainable developments, you can refer this link where you can understand how the United Nations have created, a sustainable development goals, and there are a lot of open source contributions happening around that. And if you come from a Microsoft or .NET background, this is a very good opportunity to start there, right? And that's what we are planning to bring into our communities, be it X-Hackers or B.NET. We are planning to group, together so that we can, going forward, if you need any help to getting started with open source contributions or tools, make your project into open source as a maintainer. So we are there to help you, right? And basically, if so this is a good opportunity today that we are starting with our Hacktoberfest edition, where you will come to know about how to get started with open source. But once you are comfortable going forward, we can also conduct hackathons, for social good, as well as in case if you would like to, build something, just, group together on a weekend if you would like to bring something. So based on the feedback, we will, we would be conducting these hackathons as well. Now, there was a feedback in our last meetup where, even though we given our social channels, right, we are on Facebook, Meetup, YouTube, but our community members, and considering this objective and roadmap, our community members wanted a real time, channel basically, or a real time chat conversation where you can, just post your queries, and if you are stuck somewhere, you'll get the updates in real time. So we have considered their feedback, and I am excited to announce today that we are also, we have created a Discord community server for our X-Hackers and B.NET user group, basically combining a .NET developers user group. So where you can join and start the conversation all about it. And let me just try to show you, a quick glimpse about it. So you can join using the link which I showcased on the slide. I have posted the same on our channels as well. And once you join the invite, you will land to this Bangalore Microsoft user group, right? Like I mentioned, we are combined, since even Xamarin or Maui, right, is also evolving and combining into .NET. We have also combined both of our, unified both of our groups and created it as a Bangalore Microsoft user group. So you can join here, and let me just give you just a quick introduction about it. You can, read the community rules to participate, and maintain that etiquette basically. And there are different channels created here. Like in case if you want to talk, you could utilize the specific channels about .NET, Xamarin, and Azure. And like I mentioned, going forward, we'll be having more interaction and collaboration. So you could also start your conversations, on the under the collaborate category, where you could talk about a project which you are working on. And if you need any open source help, you can start your conversation here as well, right? So let's make you, I hope this community Discord server would be helpful for you. Make use of it and let us know your feedback, right? And with that note, we still have 1 minute before I jump to the, the Hacktoberfest session. So at this time, any feedback, from the community town hall and meetups perspective, basically updates perspective? Would you like to give any quick feedback? feel free to drop, message, or if you would like to unmute yourself, you can unmute. Let us know. All right. I'll also share a feedback link so you can provide your feedback there, because I would like to grow this community, with by collecting the feedbacks. Like I mentioned in our last meetup, we got some feedback around creating a, real-time conversation chat. So that's here you go. So similarly, if you have any other feedbacks, do let us know and we'll try to include in our upcoming meetups, right? All right. Let's switch to the main session slide. All right. Just to before I begin, can just anyone confirm me? Am I audible loud and clear for everyone?
Yes, you are audible.
Yep. Thank you. All right. Okay. I want to talk to you today about Hacktoberfest 2020 and how you can, start with open source. And basically, this is a practical guide to getting into open source. There are a lot of guides available on internet, but I wanted this session, since I participated in last Hacktoberfest 2019, I wanted to share my experience, my learnings out of it. So this would be like more of around, little bit of theory and more of a practical. Okay. And I remember a great perspective from Scott Hanselman here. So, and I don't think you guys realize that being at a virtual conference or meetup like this puts you in the top 1% of the software developers, because you are here. You have already taken your first step to contribute to open source. So feel proud for yourself. So today I have a lot of content to cover, as I mentioned, and things to show you, but I have structured it in this way. So we will start with understanding, open source. What exactly is open source and how you can contribute, and what are some of its benefits, right? Why do you care about it? Why do you contribute? How it can even boost your career, right? Some of you have mentioned that you have joined, you are still in colleges and you are beginners, so that's keep an eye on those slides, so because this will really help you when as you progress in your career, right? And then I'm going to introduce about a little bit about Hacktoberfest, right? And basically I'll be sharing my experience with it, and will be showing you how to do stuff with contributing to open source projects, right? And submitting your pull request basically. And from going forward, I mean, just for the slang purpose, I'll call it as a PR, right? Pull request. And I'm those who are very new to the open source world, I'm going to explain what exactly is it. Okay. And for the exam, I mean, for better understanding, we will take examples of some of the Microsoft projects. Basically, I'll go with Xamarin.Forms, right? And I also touch upon like Xamarin Community Toolkit, right? So there is like one large project and another one is a lightweight project. So for both beginners and advanced, you can choose accordingly and you can start with, right? And I'll also showcase you a lot of about like other .NET projects in case if you would like to start with that. So as like I mentioned, this is a practical guide which can be applicable to any open source project out there, right? And we will be switching in between slides and projects to see that in action, right? And at the end, if time permits, I'll also want to showcase some of the PRs and like my learnings from the Hacktoberfest 2019. So there would be a lot of tips and resources and a lot of information. So just a disclaimer here. So before I go too far into all of that, it would be good to know about where you are in your open source journey. So is there anybody in the room who has contributed to open source project already? Or how many of you have GitHub account, or you manage any repository or push codes to GitHub? If you want, you can unmute yourself or you can drop in the chat box. So this will give me an idea about how many of you, like already aware of Git and GitHub. manage repositories there, push codes to GitHub. I'll take a pause here. I hope no one no one has ever worked on GitHub. No worries. Mhm. Nice. So we do have some folks who have GitHub accounts who have probably used GitHub accounts, right? Or probably accessed it, but not contributed, right? Nice. Nice. So we have Akshay here who has also contributed to, right, as part of the POCs. Nice. So that saves us a quite bit of time, but given the mixed responses that we have, I'm going to take, dive into some of the parts of the Git and GitHub as well, which is one of the prerequisite, before you go into open source world. So let's get started. So I believe in storytelling, okay, because that's what makes us connected, right? I'm gonna give you a little bit of guide how I got interested in open source and how it really changed my career, right? And then we are gonna dive into the details required for the contribution. Okay. So, and I'm calling it a practical guide because I strongly believe that you are not here to change your entire career, right? Basically, quit and focus only on open source job, right? You have day jobs, you have your, like some of you have connected from colleges, right? You have your studies. So you have things basically you enjoy. So you might be looking at it and wondering, why is this really required, right? Or should I be really doing this? Should I really care about open source, right? So we are going to dive into all of that and discuss more in detail. So this is where it begins. Feels good, right? Especially developers would know that life would be much easier if I have access to the source code, right? And this is one of the reason among others about why I tend to prefer working on open source, right? As you can see from my intro slide, I come from a web development background, right? And I was doing projects integrated with commercial tools such as Sitecore, Actron, Salesforce, Dynamic CRM, right? So these are very popular and powerful tools, but there were bugs and sometimes main features missing, right? And on daily basis, I used to found that I had the skills and background where I can solve these very frustrating little problems, right? Or some of these problems were even faced by our customers as well, right? And in these tools, sometimes main functionality or even a crude operation was also missing, which if I could get a chance, I could have fixed it, right? So it's just that distance from me to the solution, right? And the best I could do is open a ticket and never hear back, right? Because not everyone is providing a world class support like Microsoft, right? And because of this, I just really did not enjoy that non open source world or more of a commercial world, right? Because it being a developer, it felt so distant that if I want to fix something, I couldn't, right? And it really felt so distant from what I loved, solving the problems. As a developers, we love solving the problems, but there was always this kind of barrier or restriction exist, right? So basically, it really came down to three things which non-open source model consist, and that really frustrated me. It's that you can't fix anything you use. The best you can do is open a ticket, right? And you don't know who is making those decisions about getting, what gets fixed, which leads to sometimes disappointment. Why isn't the thing that I or my customers value being fixed, right? And if there are people behind those support calls and queue and basically those tickets which you raise, you don't feel like they care about you, right? Now, with open source availability in today's market, almost every tool or framework, be it Kubernetes, Docker, Node.js, Xamarin, Flutter, you just name it, right? These are very widely popular tools, and they are being used, by almost every customer and company. And uh, there, I mean, these are the people like us who created these tools. There isn't any wall between you and the backlog of those issues that you can see and even participate. You can even contribute and fix those things. So that open source model is really satisfying, right? So basically, in the open source world, right, or in the open source model, you can fix anything you use or care about, right? Yes, you need to understand how to, and we will talk about that, right, in today's session. But this is a great, but you have that opportunity, to fix it. And you also know who is making it. You can look at the GitHub or the commit history, right, to find people's name. And they are often seeking help, basically, right? They are often seeking help. They are mentoring through their social media channels today, right? And these are the makers. They really care about you because they come from that development background, right? And I have experienced that while contributing to open source as well. I'll give you some examples related to that, right? So open source model addresses our problem solving issues, right? What we had, basically with non-open source model. So let's move ahead. All right. So what are the other benefits, right? So apart from these benefits, what we talked about, right? About I mean, directly go and you can fix the issues being a developer, right? So there are also few facts around business side of it, right? As you must have seen, small as well as large organizations, right? Be it like Red Hat, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Netflix, they are heavily investing in making, $1 billion on open source, and it is expected to grow exponentially to around 500 plus $1 billion in next 15 to 20 years, right? So think of this in this way. If we get into open source and start participating now, our resumes will be astounding by the time those 15 or 20 years rolls around, right? And as you can see, there are at present there are around 300 plus job openings at Microsoft that mention open source, right? And that's from software engineers to managers to support engineers, right? You don't need to be a complete, like you can say, a core programmer or developer around it. You can contribute in different ways, which we'll talk about. But so basically it's good for business and it's good for our career as well, right? And it's becoming useful in other places too, right? For example, if you have a side hustle, right, you are already working in a, let's take an example. You do the web development in your regular daytime, right? But if you are not happy with that, you can continue your side hustle by doing the web development in the daytime, but in the evening or night you can do something on robotics, automation, even AI, ML, or Arduino, right? Or if you would like to bring change in your career, so open source is something that gives you that chance, right? And experience with open source, what you get, that gives you a competitive advantage because you are already working on all those projects, right? So today, universities and colleges are using it, right, as part of their minor, major projects or curriculums, right? Even government and NGOs are also using it to bring innovation, right? And using open source for good. And what I meant from open source for good means when you work towards, social welfare, you're solving issues on climate, COVID-19, for example, right? So if you see the MyGov site or Digital India site, they are also even encouraging everyone to participate. One of the good example, if I remember, the Arogya Setu app, right, which has become open source as well. So it's almost everywhere, and it's just a distance from you to go and just grab the opportunity and start working on it, right? So far we talked about, right? So basically the what is open source, right? How does it look like? And the next is, what is it and where is it and what does it look like, right? how you can go ahead and start contributing, right? So first thing before we go into that as you I mean basically, as you are already using some of the open source technologies or libraries, so if you are from a like a development background, or even if you work on Xamarin, right, you are already using the Xamarin.Forms, which is an open source library, right? You are already contributing to it by being a consumer and providing feedback, right? So this is one way of even participation. But as a developer, or if you belong from a QA background or architect background, manager background, anything like that, next, if you want to contribute to the main project, right? So let's talk about where and how you can get started, right? So as I mentioned, my contribution started with last Hacktoberfest, right? So even I was learning like Xamarin that time, and I got a chance that Microsoft is participating in Hacktoberfest, right? So before I go into that, so for those who are new to this term, Hacktoberfest, as I was, because when I started, so Hacktoberfest is a month-long, virtual festival event, right, to celebrate open source contributions, and it is presented by DigitalOcean and Dev community, right? And it occurs every October, like its name suggests. You could see like Hacktober, right? So where so basically during this month long like October event, all the open source maintainers give new contributors extra attention, right, and guidance to raise their first pull request, basically a PR, right? And it's very popular across the world, right? It's not only in India. So think of this like almost all the major open source organizations are taking part into it. Okay, so and like I mentioned, you just name it: Microsoft, Google, Netflix, everyone, almost all the GitHub projects on open source. To further introduce Hacktoberfest, for this year, I would like to play here a message from CEO of DigitalOcean, which is Yancy Spruill, right? And I'm gonna play this video just in a bit. Let me just try to close other tabs. Um, all right, let me just switch to my output speaker, and just any one of you, I'll just play it a bit, and just any one of you can confirm and it is loud and audible for you, right? So just give me a minute.
Spruill here, DigitalOcean CEO, and I'd like to welcome you to the 7th.
Is it audible for everyone?
Yes, Darkesh, it's audible.
Sure. So I'm gonna put my headphones near to the speaker and let you enjoy this video, just a short one, and then we'll continue our session, right? So, all right, here you go.
Annual Hacktoberfest. Hacktoberfest is a month-long celebration of open source software for all 31 days in October. And in this event, this month-long event, we bring together over 100,000 people to contribute to the betterment of open source software. At this annual event, we have open source projects where developers become contributors, students and early learners, learn more and build their passion and experience. And we gather people together online. Historically, we've done offline, but in 2020, I suspect will be predominantly online. But we bring people together from over 150 countries throughout the world. At DigitalOcean, one of our core values is around community. And the pillar of the language of that value is we say, our community is bigger than just us. And I can find no better representation of our investment and our passion for fostering a global community of developers and entrepreneurs than Hacktoberfest. It's an important element for us because it brings so many people together in this very global way for 31 days, and it generates so much excitement and passion around one of our core value propositions as a business, which is around open source. And what we believe happens during the month of Hacktoberfest, not only do we bring people together, but we help people learn and we help people grow. And that's a fundamental tenet of what we're all about at DigitalOcean in terms of enabling global entrepreneurs and developers to test ideas, build their businesses, and chase their dreams. So what we hope that you'll gain is that you'll participate, you'll learn a little bit more, you'll join a project, you'll meet new people, and you'll help make open source software better for the legions of people who use it today and well into the future. So with that, I can't wait to see you all and what you will come up with this year at Hacktoberfest. And remember that for those projects that are accepted, you get the famous DigitalOcean Hacktoberfest t-shirt, a prize well worth earning during the month of October. So until then, be well, and we'll see you in October.
I hope it was loud and clear for everyone, and I hope like that inspires and motivates you for open source contributions. Let's move forward. I just switched to my headphone, so sorry. Like, can just anyone confirm me? Am I audible?
Yes, bro, you're audible.
Yep. Thanks. And just to inform you here, like I am not sure if I told this. So in case if you have any queries right in between, since I mean, if you would like, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can drop your question like on the chat box. So at the end, I'll take a look at all the questions and we'll try to answer. So let's go with the flow. So if you're new to open source, right, this is the easiest way to get started. I'm talking about Hacktoberfest here, right? All you have to do is contribute to any open source project out there, right? And raise at least valid 4 PRs, right? Basically the pull requests. So you can sign up anytime between October 1st to October 31st. So Hacktoberfest is already started. And just to be sure, make sure that you sign up on the official Hacktoberfest website. So I'm going to show you that in a while, right? And another important thing is that you can do any kind of contribution. You don't need to be an expert in programming or coding, right? So if you would like to, let's say, fix a bug basically. So you can do a bug fix, you can do any improvement in the open source library, right? Or it could be even a documentation change as well, right? So it's all about contribution and enhancing that open source library, which you might be using in your projects too, right? So at this point of time, let me try to show you that Hacktoberfest website as well quickly. So you can just access Oktoberfest.digitalocean.com, and facing a slowness here. All right. In the meantime, this loads. Let's continue with our session slides, and I'm going to show you the next slide. Don't know, there is some issue with my network. All right, so let it load, and in the meantime, we'll just continue. So like I mentioned, there is a Hacktoberfest website, right? And talking about Microsoft projects, and also I noticed that Microsoft even participate in Hacktoberfest, right? They started, I think, back in 2018, And in 2019, even Xamarin participated in Hacktoberfest, where I got to know about it, right? And let me just show you. And these are the rewards basically, right? Associated with the Hacktoberfest. Let me just directly show you if the page got loaded directly on this website itself from Microsoft, right? So David, as you already know, right, they have posted about Hacktoberfest Xamarin Edition, right? There were a couple of rules around it that even though I have mentioned that you need to raise 4 pull requests, right? So similarly, if you raise 4 pull requests, you are eligible for a Xamarin T-shirt, right? And if you are managed to raise 10 pull requests, you are also, you get a chance basically to receive directly a Xamarin trophy from David, right? So when I started, I wasn't even sure of like submitting 4 pull requests because I never accessed the Xamarin.Forms repository. I mean, though even I have used it in my projects, but not the core Xamarin.Forms library. So I wasn't even sure that I could, submit 4 pull requests. But eventually, when I started, basically lay my hands dirty on the code and all that, I was able to manage 10 pull requests during the month, right? And basically, one of the thing, if you see the awards section here, right, where they announce the awards, one of the thing I noticed that even though we have so many .NET developers and especially Xamarin developers as well, there were very few like parties basically from on the Microsoft project side. There were very few participation from India, and that's where I want now you are also part of the community, right? .NET community, and that's one of the reason why we included that in our roadmap, right? And I want more participation from all of you, right? If you need like we discussed about so many benefits out of it, if you need any help, we are here to help you, right? You can reach out to me in case if you are need any help with your pull requests and all. But basically, let's try to grow our open source culture, as part of our .NET communities as well. So this is that Hacktoberfest website which I was talking about. You need to make your account here, in order to um, count your pull request. So basically, let's say if you like contribute to any open source projects out there, and if that open source project is already, I mean, usually during this month, most of the Hacktoberfest, like open source projects are already connected with Hacktoberfest. So they usually try to do this pull based mechanism, right? So you just create your account here and you contribute to any repository. As soon as your valid 4 PRs are, you have submitted, and there is a time, I think they take it like around 7 days or something. They try to check if it is a valid PR and it is not just a spam kind of thing, right? And you will receive an email from them, for the on the confirmation of your T-shirt. Or this time they're also going little bit like green with environment, so you could even plant for a tree as well. So these are some of the rewards from the previous Hacktoberfest. So let's talk further about so rewards are fine, right? But for me personally, seeing this screen of your pull request getting approved and merged, right, is the most satisfying feeling, right? And to be honest, I never felt that satisfaction before when I was raising pull requests, even in my enterprise based or commercial based projects, right? But contributing to Xamarin.Forms, right, or any large open source community product, right? So Xamarin.Forms is especially has over 1.6 million developers across 120 countries, right? And I personally believe that being a developer, it is the greatest feeling for a developer, right? That makes you happy when millions of people use your few lines of code in day-to-day life, right? So that's the most satisfying feeling, keeping aside even rewards also. So that has its own, like benefits. All right. So we so far we talked about what is open source contributions, right? Benefits, where you can start. About Hacktoberfest we have seen, right? Now let's see how you can get started, right? What are some of the prerequisites and steps basically when you are starting with open source, right? So first step is the Git and GitHub basics, right, as part of the prerequisites. Now, some of you have, and I would like to explain a little bit about this one because this is very important before we directly jump into any of the projects, right? So that's one of the reason why I was asking that question, right? Because uh, I mean, suppose if you are new, so you could pay attention here, like what about Git and GitHub basics and all, right? And basically, even if you are a enterprise, you come from an enterprise, you're currently working in a company, right? Mostly we usually use the basic commands, right? But I would like to also like recommend here to get or grab your hands on some of the advanced Git commands as well. And there are a lot of resources out there to help you get started with that. But I'm going to show you my curated list, or where you can go and get started, right? I created this list, basically a curated list on the URL list, which was introduced in last, I think, Microsoft build 2019. It was built by one of the Microsoft employee. And basically, I was talking about Git, right? So you can get started with Git here. Some of the basic commands, right? You can push your commits, pull your commits, and creating your remote, right? And when I say those who are new to Git, basically, when you create an account on GitHub, let me try to open that as well for you. All right. Right. So when you create your account here, right? So basically GitHub internally uses a version control, which is widely popular, Git, right? So these are some of the Git basic commands which you should be knowing, right? Pushing your codes, pulling your codes, connecting with your remote. Now, when I say remote, which means you are creating your repository within your GitHub account, right? That becomes your let's say your own your code repository, right? And when you clone this code repository, right, in your machine, be it in VS Code or Visual Studio, right, that becomes your local copy, right, which is using the local Git from your local machine, right, Visual Studio. And then you need to set up this connection with your remote, which is hosted on GitHub, right? So some of those mechanism or commands, these are some basic commands you must be using already in your enterprise, right? But I want to focus specifically here and from my learning, right? Because when I started, even I started with basic commands, right? And if I talk about advanced, the maximum what we use is the merge command, right? When you are merging some repositories, right, and then you resolve those merge conflicts, that's the maximum of for us, right? So unless we are hosting our repositories on GitHub, and then you might be using these advanced Git commands. But I would like to enforce here that please before you start a project, you could start with basic as well, right? But please take a look at the some of the advanced Git commands as well. For example, rebase, right? So in the open source world, when you so basically you don't directly work on the code repository, right? You actually fork the repository from the original or owners. So let's say if I am working on Xamarin.Forms, right? So let me just show you. Let's say if I pick this project to work upon, I usually fork this repository, right? So it is going to create a copy of that project, right, into my GitHub account, right? And then we basically work on it, right? So what happens usually when you submit a pull request, right? And usually if it is a large open source project, right? So it takes time to get your pull request merged to that original author's repository, right? And sometimes they ask you to go ahead and rebase your changes, right? So let me just give you a little bit info about the rebase also. So basically, the rebase operation when compared to merge, so both are merge operation and rebase operations both does the merging basically from your from the repository from where you have created your feature branch, right? Let's take example of a master branch from where you created your feature branch, right? And both of these do the merging, but in a, I mean, if you think from a rebase perspective, it just allows you to just change the series of commits, right? Which means whatever your master branch is, right? And in your feature branch, let's say you have 3 commits where you have fixed some code, or you have fixed some bug fix, right? So those 3 commits are going to rebase on top of your merged, on top of your master branch, so when you do the rebase. Whereas when you do the merge operation, it always creates a new commit. It merges your changes, and it would be in the order of how your master branch contains the changes, right? And then how, based on your date, time stamps, how your changes are merging. So basically, you're merging your changes, right? And it always creates a new commit, right? So this is not only the one of the benefit of rebase. The another benefit is it shows you the series of commits. Let me just show you, for example, like this, right? And this is called as an interactive rebase. And I would recommend, like, if this is something advanced, if it's good to start with and know these things before you start contributing. But even though if you don't know, the basic commands with Git, you can go ahead and start contributing, right? And you can let the I mean, in open source world, all the maintainers are very, very kind. Suppose if you do not know anything about the advanced commands, you can take their help. They are always happy to help, right? But those who are like like to explore further, I would also recommend to keep your hands on the interactive rebase. Basically, it tries to show you the series of commits which you can pick, you can drop, you can edit your commit, right? You can squash your commit. These things sometimes become useful. Suppose if you raised a pull request and it for a, let's say, couple of months, it did not get merged, but during that couple of months your master branch got new changes, right? So open source maintainers usually will come and ask you to rebase your changes, right? So this is really helpful where or if you mess up with something, right, in the Git history, this also becomes very useful to at one shot you can pick and drop commits, right? So just wanted to give you a little bit explanation on those advanced concepts, which even when I started I wasn't knowing, because like I mentioned, in usually in the enterprise world also we use the merge or merge conflict and not more of like rebase, right? So this is really helpful when you are starting with open source, right? Now some of you who are not like more of like Git command tooling guy, more of a Git GUI guy, so you can, I'll give you another good resource where you can start this particular channel. I really liked it, right? Where you can find all the Git related whatever I talked about. And if you want to do that with Visual Studio Git tool, right? So you can follow this channel, and it's a great resource out there if you want to start with Visual Studio. And just a disclaimer here, whatever interactive rebase I was talking about, that interactive rebase is not yet implemented in Visual Studio. That is something you still need to do it through the command tooling. So that's one way where you can get started, right? All right. So once, is there any question? All right. Oops. So if you're not talking, you can go on mute. All right, I'm facing some issue here. Just give me a minute. Looks like today is not my day. In the meantime, if you would like to ask any question, you can ask. Meanwhile, I get to I'll try to reopen. Hmm. Hope you are enjoying the session.
Yes, bro. Here some questions are there, bro.
Yes. All right.
Uh,
So in the meantime, this opens. I can take some questions. Looks like something is consuming my memory. No, it's all good. Yep. Let me just restart my PowerPoint slide. All right. Meanwhile, this gets open. I hope we can continue with this one as a backup. Let's try.
Hi, bro. The Skype is not necessary. Just to close it, bro.
Which one?
Skype.
Okay. No, from memory wise, it looks fine. I don't see anything consuming more.
Can I close the Chrome window?
Yeah, let's try that. That's the only one I could see consuming more memory. All right. In the meantime, let's take a look at some of the questions. And if Chrome gets open, I can continue further with the next step, which is more of a finding a open source project. Let me try to do one thing. Let me just disconnect and connect back again. I hope it doesn't stop for everyone, because it looks like my Teams is consuming more memory, right?
No, bro. No issues. Can you kill the Cortana and then Mac, the virus softwares, everything?
Yep, I can try that.
If
But it
possible,
looks
we can, yeah, we can close the Visual Studio, then we will reopen it later.
yep, that also you can do, but it looks like it is below 50%. So
Yeah. Understand.
I
Maybe.
yep, let's try to do that. But in the meantime, I'll also try to reconnect, because it doesn't look like a memory problem. Um, Teams usually, like with the latest update, it was giving me problem in like in my office as well. Anyways, this is open. So right now, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep. Let's open our resources and continue. In the meantime, that slide so gets open. Anyways, I want to make this more interactive. So uh, let's try if it can open. I think it has become little faster now. All right. Not to waste further time, let me start further. So once you are comfortable with Git, right, with the Git commands and the resources I have given you, let me just show you quickly two more resources. If you are more of a like a guy who is use GUI based like for Git purpose, GUI based system. And when I say GUI based, in the sense you interact with Git using Visual Studio, or if you're using any third party tool, right? So there is another resource right now which tells you, like, in case if you want to contribute, this resource will help you to set up that Git fork repository in your Visual Studio itself, right? And there's another good resource which I came across, that many times we mess up with things, right? So I want you to prepare with that also, right? So not every time we commit correctly or things like that, but this resource will help you, right? Which is called as oh shit Git, right? So for example, oh shit, you have worked, messed up with something, right? I did something terribly wrong. So these are some of the, you can say, a kind of FAQ or scenario based the Git faults which we usually make, or Git mistakes which we usually do, and some of the resolutions around it. So keep an eye on this one as well. It's a good one. And in the meantime, if I'm still facing some problems with my slides, so in the meantime, let's continue. So the next step which we saw was related to finding the project, right? Once you're comfortable with Git. So since we all come from Microsoft and .NET background, so I'll first start with that, right? So one of the resources, let me just try to open these in the meantime. um, you know so this is some first place, like, where you can look forward, like if you want like to participate in a .NET Foundation project, then this is the link where Microsoft or .NET Foundation projects, where you can head over, and this will give you a list of all the Microsoft projects which are out there on GitHub, right? Be it a VS Code, or a terminal, the Windows terminal, right? If there is a Windows calculator as well, right? Even Maui is also there, right? Which is the evolution of the Xamarin.Forms. So there are a lot of projects out there. Some of the and if you would like, if you're thinking from a large, you can say, a open source project which is well maintained, right? Because you should also, while picking a project, you should also take a look at the GitHub history of that project, right? So that it gives you idea how how many updates usually happening in this project, whether it is a valid or active project or not, right? So .NET Foundation, this particular page, you will also find a lot of good open source .NET projects or Microsoft projects which are out there in world, and have and since it is connected to .NET Foundation, which means you don't need to worry about its activeness. These projects are all active, be it Eka.net, Automapper, most of these open source libraries you might be using in your projects as well. So here you go. I mean, you can take a look at all the projects where you would like to contribute to. Now, these two links contain the projects from Microsoft and .NET Foundation itself. Now, there are some community-based aggregators also out there, right, which will help you directly narrow down your list of projects. For example, this one, right? Discover.net, which was built by Dave Glick, right? He has created this nice aggregator kind of, right, to for awesome .net open source and community resources, right? This is a good one to bookmark for, right? This place you can find all of the open source projects. It also contains a particular issues section, so if you would like to look at the issues which are all these issues have been aggregated from those open source projects, right, which are out there. And you can also take a look at the list of the issues in case if you would like to contribute to, right? Another good resource which I could recommend, that if you are a very beginner, right, you haven't worked around Git and GitHub and you are starting how to raise your pull requests and things like that. So if you are a first timer, basically you can take a look at this resource, right? Just a, so the recording is continuing, right? Yep. Uh, so if you are a first time contributor, right, I'm happy to, showcase you that you can look at this first contribution, right? This is a tutorial kind of thing where you can even raise your pull request also, right? It helps you. You can create a sample pull request, and this will also give you an idea that how you can, how you basically fork a repository. This is a complete tutorial basically, right, on this GitHub. Just follow the steps, when you scroll down, follow those steps which it ask you, right? Fork your repository, clone your repository, and we are going to talk on that in a bit, and basically create your first pull request. So this is a nice resource for anyone who is first time starting, right? Now the other community aggregators, if I talk about, so I'm going to show you a lot of resources here, right? Like just one or two extra now. And basically this will give you the idea where you can go and how you can start, right? And we are going to take example of one of the code repositories as well, like Xamarin.Forms or Xamarin Community Toolkit, to go into details, right? Now this is another project, sorry, another resource, aggregator, kind of, right? Where you can just, like go and let me just try to refresh it. It didn't load here. So this is also place where you can search for a C# project, right? And if you would like to contribute, it is going to query on GitHub and will showcase you all the projects, built on C# and where you can go and contribute to. And in the meantime, this loads. I'm not sure why I'm still facing that slowness, even though the all right. So here's the another one, which is issuehub.io, right? The benefit of this one is it already labels your issues. So for example, if you're looking to fix something for Hacktoberfest, right? Just click on this Hacktoberfest and click on find, right? So this is now from an issue perspective. So it is going to query, and let me just try to use a language as C#. It is going to query on GitHub, and all the C# projects, open source projects, wherever Hacktoberfest label has been already made, right, by the maintainers, they are going to show you, like, all the list of issues, right? So through which you can, directly see the issue and summary here. Like for example, someone is requesting to update the documentation too, right? And if you would like to start with that, if you are a developer, you can start with some of the small, I mean, like for example, total hits counter, adding a support for any existing project, or enhancing any feature, right? Android checkbox element for this particular one, right? So this is how you can, basically go through I mean, you are finding a project from the perspective of, fixing those issues. So whichever issues you are comfortable with, you can start with simple, right? That's where it helps you, right? So, and there is also from GitHub itself also, all of these links, no need to worry or keep in mind, right? Because I'm going to share this link with you, right? So basically you can navigate directly from here. Another good resource is on the GitHub itself, right? Where you can just go ahead, and this is going to show you all those lists directly. So if you don't want to use any of these aggregators, you can directly go to GitHub and, search for the Hacktober, all the issues which are having the Hacktoberfest label. So I'm making a search here using the label, right? So these are some of the good places to start with, right? And if you would like to pick any of the projects on C# or .NET, right? For our example, we can, or like I mentioned, I have also kept a link for, if you are interested in open source for good, there are some of the repositories, around 5k repositories already working, on the COVID-19, or there are even topics related to climate change. So you can even pick these topics as well. Now there are tons of projects. Let's to understand better the further steps, I'm going to take example of one of the project, which is Xamarin.Forms, right? So let me show you the same. This is the Xamarin.Forms project, which we all use in our mobile projects, right? And let me try to see at this point that if my slide is ready, which I believe so. Um, let's just move to the, yep. So we covered the part of, finding a project to contribute it to. There are tons of resources which I have showcased you. Now, once you pick a project, right? And in our case, we will take example of Xamarin.Forms. The next step is to understand the, project solution orientation basically. And let me just show you that. And in order to set up this project, right, there are few prerequisites that you need to have Visual Studio 2019. If you don't have any enterprise one, you could still use the community version, right? And then you can also set up .NET Framework 4.7, and these are some of the guidelines. There is a coding style guide also available in the .NET, this project. So before you contribute to any project, feel free to read the contributing guide, right, which contains what are some of the coding practices basically they use. So this is a simple one. They normally use the .NET common .NET Foundation coding practices, right? um, and no need to worry about the contribution license agreement, because all the .NET Foundation projects already have this bot, which means when you raise first time when you raise your pull request, it the bot is going to take care of, like, it will present you a license, just to maintain those open source those agreements. And basically it's more of a etiquettes, so that you can follow, and then you can submit your agreement. No need to for any installation or here, right? So only these first three things you need to do, when if you would like to set up Xamarin.Forms repository in your local, right? The next part is, like I mentioned, as part of this getting started steps, is to understand the project solution, right? And let me give you an example of a Xamarin.Forms itself, right? So this is how the source the solution look like. So I already have a screenshot, but in the meantime, let me open the solution here as well, on Visual Studio, so that I can directly show you the project, you know in running mode. And in the meantime, this gets loaded. Since it is a large project, it has around like almost 50 projects within the solution itself. But let's talk about some of the projects, the folders it's here itself. So it has opened now. Let me see if I can directly show you here. Let's collapse all the projects, you know so yep. So basically, before I go forward, I we had a little bit of disconnect in between. Just any one of you can confirm, if you are able to, whatever I'm showing my slides and Visual Studio, you are able to see.
Yes, Durgesh. No
Yep.
issues.
Yep. Thanks for that. Sorry, actually, I'm having some disconnects here, so that's why I wanted to confirm in between.
Yeah, we
Uh,
understand. We understand.
yeah. Yep. All right. So let's try to understand the solution here, right? Of Xamarin.Forms, and this is applicable, even to any open source project. The steps which I am showcasing you. So there is a solution here. You can ignore new spec files. This is for internal purpose, right? I'm going to talk only on the projects where you would be mostly interacting with, right? So there is a control gallery. You can think of this as a you can say a sample application or a playground where most of the time you would be interacting with. For example, it already internally contains a shared project, right? Which so if you are aware of the shared projects in Xamarin.Forms, right? Basically, you create a shared project here, and whichever platform you are going to run it, be it Android, iOS, Mac OS, WPF, Tizen, right? So these shared projects will be automatically at runtime, compiled with your platform project, right? So and let me give you a better understanding this way, that if you're working on a bug fix, right, or something which is already there in Xamarin.Forms, you would be mostly creating your issues here under this shared projects, right? You could see that there are Bugzilla issues, but Xamarin.Forms is no longer accepting any Bugzilla. This is all the legacy issues. But if you scroll down a little bit, and you will find all the issues here, right? Issues. These are all GitHub issues, right? And I'm going to take one example also in our next, demo session. So this is also a more of a demo only. So let's try to understand that project solution first, right? Let's not go into deeper. So this is the place where you would be creating your the issues, basically, if you're working on any bug fix or like that. Now let's say if you're working on any control, right? The built-in control, right? So this is the Xamarin.Forms control project. This is a project where you will be, let's say, you will be creating, let's say you are working on button or label, the Xamarin.Form button or label, right? And if you are adding something on top of it, right, you are doing some enhancement to the existing controls, right? So this is the playground, or this is the project where you would be like, depending upon your control, because it is arranged in a control manner, right? So let me just show you the gallery. For example, let's say you're working on radio buttons, or you're working on labels, normal button, collection template. I'm going to show you that also. Let me give me, in the meantime, I'm explaining you the projects. Let's try to open the same, right? All right. So and so basically there are two parts. One is issues, where you will be working on the new fixes, and another is your control library, right? Control gallery, where suppose if you're working on a control or putting some enhancements on top of it, right? Now these other platform based control galleries are nothing, basically these are your target, right? So I am right now working on Windows machine, so that's why set this Android as my target project, and I'll be working on that one, right? So in the meantime, this loads. um, Let me put this. Yeah. So this is the one of the section where you will be interacting more, right? Another is platforms, right? So this platform section contains, some of the, so let's say if you're working on button or label, right? So these contains the platform based renderers for that, right? So and as I understand, some of you have joined from colleges, and like you are still a beginner. So I have taken the example of this project because understanding some of you already know about Xamarin, but don't worry. In case if you are, Xamarin.Forms is still a large project, right? But if some of you would like to start with, if you are beginners, I'm also going to explain Xamarin Community Toolkit, which is more of a lightweight project, right? So just a disclaimer here. Now so this platform contains mostly, like, suppose your renderers, like I mentioned, right? So you could go ahead, let's say you're working on an enhancement on a particular, control. So this is the place where, in case if you want to interact with natively, right, this is the place you will be writing your native code, right? Or if you are debugging a issue, which means this is the place you will have to, go to a particular renderer and put a breakpoint and understand that, right? So I'm just going to explain right now, and then we'll see with one of the examples which I've where I have fixed things as well, right? From like my last PRs. Now another important project, I mean, this UI test. You don't need to worry about this project, because most of your UI test you will be creating within your issues section itself, right? Or if suppose you're working on a control gallery, right? So this UI test is more of an internal project to this solution itself, which supports the issues, that shared project. Now unit testing, yes, this is important. You can't escape from it, right? Especially when you are contributing to open source project, and especially if it is a large projects, like, right, such as Xamarin.Forms, which is from Microsoft, right? They follow all the best practices, right? Industry practices. So you need to write a unit test as well. That's something recommended, right? So, and this is a good learning also, right? So this is the place, suppose, and unit tests mostly, like if you're working, you will be mostly using this when you are working on a control, right? Let's say you are working on button switch control, and you modified something or you added new properties on that, right? So this is a player where you will be writing those, unit test as well. So just for right now, understand the project solution, and we'll see with an example as well. The other projects are core projects. So this is a Xamarin.Forms core project where you will find all the core, like your visual elements and your core controls, right, which are getting built. And when you use Xamarin.Forms in your own projects, right, this is the place which, when you use namespace, right, for example, using Xamarin.Forms like that, this is the place it is going to, it comes from basically. Let me just mark this. Um, And let's stop the debugging as well because I can show you directly there. So this is the Xamarin.Forms project, and I'm going and suppose if you're working on maps and XAML based enhancements, this is the last project where you can work on, right? Now let me show you quickly because we have still less time, and most of our time got utilized by those issues. So I would like to explain here how. So when you run that control gallery, right, that Android control gallery, this is how it is going to show you in the emulator, right? So if you are working on, let's say, I mentioned, start with the simple, right? So if you're working on one of the issues, you can go ahead and you can create your issues here in the issues section by following the issue template. When I say template, let me give you an example as well here so that it would be okay. Let's take an example of this one. All right. So there is a issue template. Basically, template is nothing. You just need to follow some rules here. For example, you're working on one of the issue, let's say 5749, right? You mark your issue as like this is from a GitHub, issue tracker.github, your issue ID, a title of your issue basically, right? And once you follow this template, right? It is and basically inside that there is nothing. It usually inherits from a test content page, which is a base page has been created to almost take care of most of the common methods. For you, this is just a template, which means you inherit this, and under your init method you can write your UI controls. Now since for this particular issue I already had a XAML, where I have kept my UI, so that's the reason you see this init method is as empty, right? So let's say you are working on this issue, and I'll give you this for better understanding. I'll start with the GitHub as well, right? What this issue is about. But here, just to understand what this issue template is, when I'm speaking like issue template, you need to follow, right? So that's why I wanted to give you a brief about what this issue template is all about, right? Now, once you follow this issue template, what happens is behind the scenes, Xamarin.Forms is creating this UI dynamically, which means you go to your issue, you search for your issue, let's say 5749, right? And basically you click on that, right? So like I mentioned, this is a playground where you create your let's say you are working on a bug fix. Here you are going to reproduce your bugs, right? Which is submitted by the customers or even created by sometimes Xamarin.Forms team itself, right? So this is a place where you are going to reproduce those issues. Like for example, when I was working on this one, the issue was related to if somebody is disabling this scroll view, then also the scroll view was it was not disabled. Basically it was like you were able to, the horizontal scrolling was still enabled, right? So that's where you create, basically create a issue using the issue template. You try to reproduce, then you launch your control, your control gallery on Android, search for your issue, you try to reproduce that issue, and then you fix your issue into those platform based libraries, right? Where, because this is more of a native code, where I had to fix it. It's quite simple when you debug it, right? That's why I picked this simple one, 5749, and we will take a look at other examples as well, in case if suppose you want to enhance any existing control. right? So this is the place where you are going to make your changes and reproduce your changes, right? Now let's take an example outside. So when you go to test cases, this is the place where you will be working on your issues. But let's say if you're working on, let's say, existing control, right? Let's take an better example of I think collection view gallery, right? So this is the collection view gallery. So basically, collection view is a control, right, which helps you to, it's a enhancement over list view. Basically, it helps you to display your, list of items either horizontally, vertically. You must have used it. I mean, you must have seen this in most of the apps. For example, whichever displays the data, Spotify and all that. So let's take an example. If you are enhancing something related to snap points, right? Snap points are basically, so let's not go into detail. I have a habit of going everything, in detail. So this is what I mean, basically the collection view, snap points, you put some data. So the idea here is this is not a production ready app, but this is more of a playground where you enhance any control. You basically try to reproduce your stuff and UI here and you play with it, right? Because you need to see how does it look like on mobile, right? So there are a lot of like I'll leave this to you. There are a lot of existing controls like buttons, labels. Go ahead and explore those things, right? And feel free to reach out in case if you need any help, to start with. Just an example, like I mentioned, all the control, if you're working on an issue, you go to your issues section. If you're working on a particular control, then you go to your gallery pages, right? And this is where for example, I was showcasing your collection view gallery, right? So this is the place where you can see those collection view. So if you notice, those buttons were created, right? Snap points and all. When you go to snap points gallery, this is a place from where the UI is getting basically rendered. Now let's go back to our slides. So we understood how the project solution looks like, right? The next part is the branching strategy, right? And this is also important when you work on open source, right? Let's take an example of Xamarin.Forms branching its strategy itself, right? So if I go to branches, right, you need to understand that if you're working on an issue, right, what kind of issue you are working on so that you can target your issue to the correct, branch. Don't worry, but this is just for the knowledge, because anyways, Xamarin.Forms team or your maintainer of your open source project will automatically take care of that, right? But just for the knowledge perspective, right now, as we all know, Xamarin 5 is live, right? So basically this is your default branch, right? So if let me so in terms of rules, basically, whenever there is a regression bug, right, which has occurred because of the, your last release, right? So then it goes one version before. So if it is a regression bug, which is not specific to 5.0, it goes to the one version previous. And for example, we are talking about Xamarin Forms, which means it goes to 4.8.0 because that was the last version. So if you go to all the active branches, I can show you this is the one. You can identify using, Xamarin.Forms team usually keep this icon for the last, last release as well as the new release here, right? Which you can see as a default as well. So if there is a regression bug, it goes to 4.8.0, right? And it also gets merged to the 5.0.0, which is the, the latest one. And if there are new bugs, right, then your current branch is 5.0, it goes to the 5.0, right? And if you're working on a new feature, right, or a API, or you can say something which is not a bug, but which is more of a feature improvement, then it goes to the next version, which is like your 5.1.0. And it will also be decided by the Xamarin Forms team depending upon, their milestone for the next versions, right? So you can keep these rules in mind wherever whenever you are working on the issues or submitting pull requests. You can specify the branch correctly, right? And also rebase it on the right branch, right? So for rebase, I have already shared some resources with you. So when you always create a branch or rebase your branch to the right branch, and basically help the Xamarin.Forms team. Even if you don't do it, they'll ask you to do it, or they will even suppose if you are busy with your day jobs and unfortunately you couldn't do it, Xamarin.Forms can do it. Sorry, Xamarin team can do it on behalf of you. But don't take this as an excuse. Always try to help each other, right? All right, so this is about branching strategy, and mostly whatever I have told is common for all the projects, because they use all projects usually keep the latest version and then one version before. Regression issues goes into the one version before, right? Same stuff for everything, right? Now let's try to think now from a contributing perspective, right? And as I already told, when you contribute, right, to Xamarin.Forms, there are or any open source project, there are three essential things you need to basically, or applicable to any open source project. First, you need to always, before starting working, you need to always read the contributing file, right? Now, this is a standard for all the GitHub projects, that when you open any GitHub project, right, even including Xamarin.Forms, you will find a GitHub folder, or sometimes it could be outside that. All the, your code of conduct or contributing your issue template, which I was showcasing you, in Visual Studio, right? So let me just tell you, read this contributing file, because be it a Xamarin.Forms or any other Microsoft open source project, all the contributed relating guidelines have been, kept here. And the next thing is, be a little fearless about it. Initially it will look scary, right, when you go through the issues, backlogs, or if you plan to open a pull request, but you believe me, you can do it, right? It's not a rocket science, right? And then be also humble, because when I say humble, in the sense that you might be eventually told, right, when you are submitting in your open source, right? And if you did not communicate very effectively that, I'm working on this issue, I'm taking up this issue, like that, what happens sometimes, you may be asked, right, that this isn't helpful, or the way you did it is something we do not want. You might get these kind of things from maintainers, right? So be a little bit humble about it, because things happen like that, right? Because the reason I'm telling this, because you will be done with your pull request submission, right? But they are the people who are going to maintain it forever, right? And they are responsible for what it does, what your code does, basically, right? And it happens sometimes with me also, right? So whatever, like 10 pull requests I have raised, not every pull request, right, got submitted, because maybe sometimes someone else is also working on the same thing, right? And especially if he's from the team, right, and they are completely revamping or redesigning that stuff, then in such cases what happens, your pull requests don't usually get merged. And so basically the idea here is you communicate very effectively whenever you are picking any issues, and that's the always a key behind it. Now, the next and last step here of the contributing workflow, and we will try to understand this from a example perspective also. And we are a little bit running late here, so I hope it is okay. I'll complete the steps here, and I'll then check with you if it is okay to continue for next 5 or 10 minutes, in case if you are interested to see example of a issue, right? How we pick a issue, and then basically um, how you follow the template, you work on it, and an example of a pull request as well, right? So sorry, before we proceed, so like I mentioned, the first step is you fork and clone the repository, right? Then you create a upstream for your remote, right? So far, if you remember, when I was talking about Git and GitHub basics, I talked about remote, right? Now remote is something which is already a copy within your GitHub repository, right? And basically when you are working on open source project, right, and this is usually we don't do in our enterprise projects, because we directly have write access to the repository, or organization repository, or code which we are working on. We are the owners, right? But in the case of open source world, your original repository is with the author. For example, Xamarin.Forms is having, the Microsoft is having the copy of your Xamarin.Forms code, right? And if I want to contribute to that, I usually fork and clone the repository in my local, right? And there is a resource which I will share with you how you can do that within Visual Studio, right? And then you create an upstream for your remote, right? Basically what it does is you have your remote copy within your GitHub, and in order to get the changes from the original authors repository, you create an upstream for that, and I'll show you how you can do that in Visual Studio as well, right? The next is, once you are done with your setup, local setup, you pick an issue from the GitHub, and the some of the to basically help you further, especially in the time of Hacktoberfest, to help you quickly trace the issues. You can make use of these labels and filters, right? You can filter all the issues by if like I mentioned, during this month all the open source maintainers will already start applying these labels, right, when they need community help, right? So you can filter your issues by help wanted or up for grabs, or there are effort tags also. So what does this mean is like E1 is related to a ballpark estimate of just 1 day it will take to fix that issue, or E2 is that 2 days it will take to fix that issue. This will really help you, when you see those effort tags, to understand how easy this issue to pick and fix it, right? And I'm going to take one example also for that during the demo. Then once you are done with the and I just not to forget, whenever you are picking a issue, please communicate effectively, right? Don't just directly work in the background, because if somebody else has picked that issue, or let's say if someone from the main core team itself they are working on this issue, then you don't want to duplicate that work, right? So always communicate effectively on your GitHub. Whenever you're working on that issue, just leave a comment that I would like to explore this issue, or I already explored this issue. These are my findings. Can I go ahead and fix it? Things like that, right? So better communication, because you're not working with a team within one room. You're working a team with globally across the world, right? And anything could happen, like to avoid any duplicate efforts, right? Then once you are done with like picking a issue, you create a new branch, right? To host your changes. Basically you go to your Visual Studio, you create a new branch and you work. And like I mentioned, you follow that approach, which I like, for example, you follow your issue template, you reproduce your issue, you implement your fix, and write UI test case if possible, right? And I didn't get chance to show you that. I'll show you during the demo. So this is how you can create your UI test. And then a last step is submit. You submit your pull request, basically. I mean, once you are done with your testing, you submit your pull request to the original authors repository, and I'm going to show you that how you can do that from the GitHub perspective, right? So and once you submit your pull request, then basically Xamarin.Forms team will do the review, and they will start the review process, basically, right? Usually is with Xamarin.Forms, two reviewers will be selected to review your code. And it's a very good, I mean, to be honest with you, to share my understanding, it's very good that to directly learn from the guys who are there at Microsoft, who have extensive experience in the open source world, or maintaining a very large projects like this. And it really helps, right? If you understand from a developer perspective, is to directly learn from the people who are at Microsoft, Google, Netflix, and working on these large applications on a scaled basis, right? So this is the exciting part. I would say that it will start when you submit your pull request, right? So that's how the process is overall all about. I just limited it into 7 steps. We'll just try to understand from an example it would be more clear. So go grab a beer and celebrate. This is all you are done. You are basically submitting your pull request there. And these are the steps basically which you need to start with.
Can you please explain more on the second step, please? Upstream remote.
Yep, I'm going to take one example. So this is just, I wanted to showcase, all the steps at first on this slide. So, let's now to try to see, with an example. And I hope, like if everyone is okay, I can continue with showing a demo. Is that fine with everyone?
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry for any delays, because I tried to focus to complete this, but because of some issues I couldn't. So Let's just try to understand from a demo perspective. Okay, all these steps. So like I mentioned, you first fork and clone your repository, right? So let me go ahead and let's say I'm for example perspective, I choose this project, right? You click on fork. When you click on fork, so right now I'm within Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms repository, right? When you click on fork, it is going to create a forked copy into your account. So suppose this is my account, right? Where I have logged into GitHub and I am working on Xamarin.Forms. So you will see something like this. So this is my Xamarin.Forms account, which is forked from the original repository, right? Now I do have write access to this one, not to this one, right? Just to understand this stuff here. So I have forked and cloned basically so far I have forked the repository and I want to clone this repository into my local machine. I just go to this code section and I can, copy this URL, or you can directly open this in Visual Studio as well, whichever works for you, right? So so basically this is for beginners also, how you will, clone it. So if you are already aware of it, we are good here, right? So basically you copy this repository and when you start your Visual Studio, it asks you, right, when you go to a new project, basically if you want to clone any project, right? So when you start your Visual Studio, it will, the new UI will also give you a clone option here through which you can directly clone it. Or otherwise, if you're already within Visual Studio, you can go to Team Explorer and you can clone it, right? So this Team Explorer, I have already cloned it. The next step, which someone has asked question, right? How do you create your upstream, right? So just to be clear, when you clone your repository, the remote is already created, right? Remote in the sense you could see here that this solution is within my local, right? Which is using this Xamarin.Forms, my local Git here, which is my local path. You can see in the tooltip, right? C, and then that Dugu and then practice. This is my local Git. But when you clone a repository, it automatically creates a remote copy for you, right? This is my remote, which is within DAG, Doku and all. But what happened mostly, my remote is fine, right? But what if I want to get the latest changes? Let's say I'm working on an issue and it already took me 5 days, right? But within those 5 days, in the original author's repository, which is Xamarin Team's repository, right? I want to take latest changes out of it, right? So I need to somehow, create a upstream for that, right? So what you could do is you go to your settings and then repository settings, right? So right now I'm showing you the GUI way of doing it. But if you would like to do it using the command prompt, you could just use your, like for example, git remote add upstream, and then you can provide the path of your original author's repository, the git path basically, right? Or this is one way of doing it. Otherwise, you can go to the repository setting, and if you go scroll down, you could see the origin will already be set up by the Visual Studio for you when you clone a repository. But upstream is something you just need to click on add, right here, add, name it as a upstream, and provide your fetch URL is the original author's repository. So origin is nothing my remote repository. Upstream is nothing your original author's repository, which is github.com, Xamarin, Xamarin.Forms.git, or any of your open source project which you are contributing to, right? Once you are done with that, what you can do is, suppose if you want to take the changes, right? You go to your sync option, and then under fetch, once you add the upstream under the GitHub setting, your repository settings, you will start seeing options here. Like one is origin and another is upstream. You can select upstream and then you can click on fetch, which means now it is going to fetch all the changes, right, from your original author's repository. Once you are done with your fetch, right, you can go to your branches, and whichever branch you want to, take that changes. For example, this 5.0.0 is within my local, right? This is my local copy, and I want to merge this, merge the latest changes basically from the upstream. So I just go here, I already fetched the changes, and then I just go here and select, those upstream 5.0.0 and just click on merge. So this is usually on your day-to-day basis, or periodically you just come and you try to see that are there any new changes, and then you click on merge. And the best way to understand that if you have any new changes is just access within your repository. For example, this is my Xamarin.Forms copy. You will also see this the message here that this branch, I'm currently on the main branch. This branch is 39 commits behind Xamarin.Forms main, which is my original author's main. So I understand from this message that I'm running 39 commits behind and I need to take latest. Okay. I hope this clarifies everyone what is the difference between remote and upstream and all, right? So let me move further and try to take an example from the steps. So let's say you are done with your upstream. Then next I was talking about how do you fix your issues, right? Then you go to your issues section here, this one, right? And there are a lot of issues here, right? The best way to trace these issues is you go to label, right? And let's take an example that I want to search with this help wanted, right? Because help wanted label is usually used when your maintainer is looking for community to take these issues or help with these issues. So you could see here all the help wanted issues are out there, right? You can just go I mean, this will help you to trace your issues very quickly. And like I mentioned, there are even effort tags are also applied. And when I say effort tags, it gives you a very ballpark estimate of, that this will take 2 days of effort or this is going to take 3 days of effort to show these issues, right? Now, for better understanding, let's try to take, one example of an issue. Let me try from my collection the number of issues that I fixed in last Hacktoberfest. So let's take an example of 5749. This one I already took example, right? Let's take example of 8279. This one was more of related to, enhancing the list view scroll to basically, there were different cases. So the origin, this is a pull request, what you see right now. The original issue is this one, 8279, right? Where someone will provide the description of the issue. So you read these issue. They also, there is a better issue template here because they say what is the expected behavior, what is the actual behavior. You go through these issues. If you need any information from the original, let's say whoever has posted this issue, you can start the conversation with them. For example, you can see here, like I'm asking some of the information and clarifying my understanding. The process is very similar to how you work within your organizations also. So you basically try to collect that data, or a sample. Also, if you want to ask them, you can ask them a sample. As a best practice, they usually attach sample also of the issue. Then let's say I'm working on this issue 8279, right, which is the issue number. Then I go to my Visual Studio and I'll create a new branch, right, basically under branches for that issue. I already have this one, like fix 8279, right? Once I'm And then basically I check out my branch once I have created. And let's say I am working on this issue, so I go, this is a bug fix, right, example. I in order to reproduce it, I go to my shared section and I go to that particular issue. So let me just show you. Let's take example of 8279 should be here, right? This is the one. So you have this issue 8279. Like I mentioned, you need to follow a issue template here, like for example, issue tracker, GitHub, right? And provide your issue number and little bit about issues. And then you start whatever, this is your playground now, whatever you want to reproduce for that issue. If you already have a sample, you can copy paste from the sample, which is attached by the person who has already raised this issue. You can put that code here if you want, and then you can start reproducing. So I already have this one. Let me show you here. So this issue was more of, basically the list view was not scrolling to if you have a, let's say, header, right, on your, so there is a scrollable area. You could even provide a header to your scroll, and then within that you have some child items, right? So the issue was like it wasn't scrolling to a item, or let's say to a header, if it does not have any items, right? So, and when I was working on this project, right, I was also talking with Gerald, basically, um, uh, you know uh, and he's a software engineer at Microsoft and also at Xamarin.Forms. He's one of my mentor at Xamarin.Forms, where I always connected with him if I had any queries, things like that. So Xamarin.Forms team is very active. They'll help you, if you are stuck somewhere. So we discuss some of the use cases, for this ticket or for this issue. I implemented those fixes, and basically I wanted to show you the unit testing part, also the exciting part. So if I go and switch to, let me, right, it doesn't allow me to change to the UI test mode. I'm not sure why, but this is the one UI test which I was talking about. So let's say I have there here different use cases, right? For example, you scroll with no item, but there is a group item. You scroll with item, but there is no group item, like that. So there are different use cases. So I created a UI test also for the same, right? And this is a straightforward, simple UI test where you wait for your element, you tap your element, like that. These methods are already built in, available under that UI test project which I showcased you, right? So within your shared template itself, you try to reproduce your issue, and you also create UI tests associated with it, right? And this, once you are done with the let's say your the code changes, basically if you would like to let me go to the pull request one. Suppose you are done with your changes, you committed your changes, and you want to raise a pull request now, right? So I am at let's take example, I am at my fix 8279 branch, right? You click on compare, right? And then you click on compare, and then you create a pull request. Here you can see the option, you see all of your changes, you create pull request, and this is the template for the pull request which I was talking, telling, showcasing in the slide, that you provide description of your change. And this is this is a large project, a standard project, right? Where you could just add some information about what changes you have done, and boom, you can create your pull request and you are good to go, right? Now I just want to take a couple of minutes to showcase you the another project, which is Xamarin.Forms community toolkit, right? Because Xamarin.Forms is still a large project, right? But someone who is starting, with and who knows Xamarin and wants to start with some light project, right? So Xamarin community toolkit is a light project where you can start with, right? This is this is a small project. If you could see, it just contains a Xamarin community toolkit and a sample project. So whenever you work on a toolkit, you can create a sample for your to reproduce whatever feature you have added. And just to explain you further, what exactly is Xamarin Community Toolkit? It's a project, currently being supported by Microsoft, and as well as it is also part of .NET Foundation, right? So here you can, there is, this is a common place where all the very common built-in controls or effects or behaviors or animations, right, which you use in your project, you can come here and you contribute to that, right? So even in your organization, suppose you have been using any reusable components or reusable animations or behaviors, and if you would like to contribute, we feel free to contribute here. Like you can come to, you can see even in the converter section, all the the common converters have been kept here. You can even take code from here and keep it in your implement in your project as well. So this is another light project where even let me give you a better resource for this one to further understand. So Gerald has written a very good blog post for it, and let me just show you a couple of resources around it, right? So he has even posted a video, and he's very active on YouTube and Twitch. You can follow his live stream. So basically, Xamarin Community Toolkit, one of the vision also for this project is that they will be creating, built-in components which couldn't be part of Xamarin Forms, but now here they'll be driving this further as part of Xamarin Community Toolkit. In the meantime, Maui is working on, right? And probably in the future, they will merge these controls and commits. Some of these controls will become also a base version for your Maui project, right? So that is the idea behind creating this light project. It is still starting. The pre-release has already happened, so this is a good way to start interacting with the open source maintainers. There is a nice core term, team here. Some of you might be already knowing about Andre. He's a very your expandable view and your I mean, he's very famous in that. He has done a lot of contributions in Xamarin.Forms. Charlene is there, who is very popular with Xamarin Girl or Zam Girl, right? And there are others. So Steven is there. You might be using his, Rainbow library or Pancake library. He's also part of the same project. Javier is there, who is an expert in geometry and shapes. You must have heard about him. He has recently contributed to Xamarin Community Toolkit. He's pushing all of his templated UI controls here, right? And Gerald is already there, one of our favorites, right? Basically, he's also focusing on Xamarin.Forms, and he is also, along with the Pictos, who has a very good, he's also another contributor. And if suppose you're contributing to Xamarin Community Toolkit, you must have, like, he's very good and knowledgeable person at Xamarin Community Toolkit, and he will help you out to how you can start with creating your contributions to the Xamarin Community Toolkit. And like I mentioned, there are a lot of, like, already work is started, like range sliders, avatar view is there, right? Where this is a very common tool control which is already being used. There are already PRs, pull requests happen for camera view, right? Built-in camera view within Xamarin.Forms, and also a media view, right? So what there are also I saw on Twitter that there were requests came for creating a payment gateway kind of control. So all your common controls which you would like to build or contribute to, this is a very right project to for you to get started with. There is already, like, if you go to this project Xamarin Community Toolkit, you can go to the wiki section and the contributing guideline, where all the guidelines have been kept, right? And just to show you the project showcase, I'm just running it a little bit because we are running out of time. So like I mentioned, this is a very lightweight project, where you can just go to under behaviors, you can find all the extended behaviors. If you have a converter which you would like to contribute to common use, you can contribute there as well. Just one class file and you are done, right? um, and then your effects, and if you have any controls or views, right, like for example tab view and like that, you can go ahead and contribute to this one, right? So that's all about the Xamarin Community Toolkit. The preparation, whatever steps we talked about, forking, cloning, and then creating upstream, finding issues. So if you go to issues section, there are like I mentioned, the work has already started in this. There are a lot of issues. You can go ahead and pick ones. Always communicate first, before taking up an issue. And I also created a spec here. Probably, there are specs have been created where I would need. So rating view is another one which have been requested, right? So let me go to the first one. So I also need some help here. If you would like, you can start, with, so there is a Gravtar image source which was requested by Dan. So I also requested here, like, auto suggest box control, right? So if you remember, like when you type something right on Google Maps or any of your application page, when you type something, you would like to request, you would like to display some auto suggestions here. So this is something I already started as back, and there was initial idea to incorporate the existing implementation. So if you have any design considerations, and if you would like to already have this implementation in your projects, you can go ahead and start and participating here as well. So some of the projects are already there. All right. So, I mean, one of the feedback also I need from you is, on Xamarin Community Toolkit is, since the team is, actively trying to put guidelines and the README stuff, right? But I would like from my community as well, like just feel free to let us know, if you need any help, or if these contributing guidelines are not helpful for you, if you are still stuck at somewhere, if anything which is stopping you to proceed further, feel free to reach out to me or the Xamarin team here, core team, right? And they are very active, by the way, in case if you need any help. All right, so that's all I have for today. Here's the resources like handy list, which I was showcasing you. I'll share this resource with you, which contains almost all the, links which we talked about. You can also follow the Xamarin team, especially, Giraj and Javier and Shane. They are very active on, especially on the topics, how you can contribute to the repositories, right? And if you need any help, they are very active out there. They have their YouTube channels, they stream live on Twitch. You can follow them, right? And in case if you want, similarly, the way we have created our Discord community server, right? So if you need to have a real-time conversation, if you're participating, especially, if to the open source .NET projects, you can join the .NET Discord team, on the Discord server. Basically, let me just, so I have kept a link here as well, where you will find all of these amazing people. There are channels specifically for .NET, Xamarin, Maui, right? All the .NET Foundation related projects, and you can get your help with. And you can also follow Matt Broberg, who is another open source maintainer and advocate, right? He really has a good and lot of resources there. So with that note, I'm done with my slides, and I know we are running out of time, but I would like to keep here session open ended now, in case if you would like to discuss anything, which was not clear, or any feedback, any questions. I'll keep the forum now. I plan to actually showcase some of the my other pull requests as well, in detail, but today is not my good day. There were a lot of other issues, so unfortunately I couldn't. Let me try to open my wrap up slide, and in case if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. So before we end, I would like to thank everyone who joined here, and patiently, like, even though we stretched a little bit, but patiently, listen to whatever I had to say. And basically, I hope this session, which is basically Hacktoberfest, is started already, right? And today is the third day. I hope this session will help you to pace up quickly, like basically to the with the open source projects. And like I mentioned in our community town hall, this session, we are planning to encourage we encourage everyone to start participating with open source projects. And this guideline, whatever I have showcased you and my experience, where which I shared with you, I hope this is helpful for you. Going forward, if you plan to like keep an eye on our social channels for the next events. We plan to do another one in November, which is with Azure community. We are grouping together with all the communities, and one event we are planning there. But before that, if anyone is happy to like take any session, we are also looking constantly for the amazing speakers. Or even if you want to start, if you're a beginner, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll personally help you to create your slides. Or if you need any help with open source contributions, you can submit your proposal here on this link. And like I mentioned, we have also created a Discord community server, so feel free to post your queries and start the conversation here on Discord server. With that note, I again thank you for joining, and you have a nice day. I'll just keep the forum open if anyone would like to ask any question, and I'll stop the recording now. We can go with the open forum now.